Hi, fourth grade. Welcome back to your math lessons. Please take out your textbook, your math journal, and your workbook. Please label your math journal lesson 20.6, classify quadrilaterals, and turn in your textbook to page 530. When you're all set up, please pause the video and write down the following vocabulary in your journal. You have two choices though for vocabulary today. I'd like you to decide which is best for you to copy. I've simplified some notes here, or on the next page, there is a graph with the same information. Whichever one seems more clear to you, I want you to copy down that in your notes. So either the graph with all of the information or the simplified notes that's just the vocabulary word and the notes. If you'd like the first version, the vocabulary and the notes, please pause here. If you'd like the second version with the graphs, please pause here. Unpause when you're ready. All right, so you should have written down in your notes either the first list of vocabulary or the graph with the vocabulary. Either one is fine. Let's go over our vocabulary for today. As you can tell, this lesson, yet again, is very heavy on your knowledge of vocabulary. We're going to be classifying quadrilaterals today. Quadrilaterals are shapes that have four sides. Now, depending on how these sides interact with one another, what kind of angles they form, if the sides are parallel or not, will determine on what type of quadrilateral it is. But all of the objects we are talking about today all have four sides. So the general term quadrilateral means four straight sides. So all of these shapes and figures here are all quadrilaterals, but they have specific names depending on how the sides interact with each other. Trapezoids have one pair of parallel sides. To remind you, parallel means that the lines are the same distance apart and they never intersect. So trapezoid has at least one set of sides that are parallel. Parallelograms have two pairs of parallel sides. Parallelograms' root word is parallel, meaning two lines that never intersect and are always the same space apart. Now, there are three different types of parallelograms. There's the rectangle, the square, and the rhombus. So specifically, as specific as we can get, we look at the sides, the number of sides. That tells us what type of shape it is. Then we look to see how the sides are interacting. That will tell us whether it's a trapezoid or a parallelogram. And then we can break it down even more by looking at its angles. So let's go over to the next slide where we see the examples of the pictures. So as you can see, there are different types of parallelograms. A rectangle is a parallelogram, which is also quadrilateral. So if you follow the route up this way, it just keeps going up the steps. So a rectangle is a type of parallelogram that's also quadrilateral. It has two pairs of parallel sides, but the opposite sides are equal. Now, this can also include squares, which is why it then breaks down to squares next. Squares can also be classified as rectangles, but specifically a square, not only does it have two parallel sides and four right angles on the inside, just like a rectangle, but it also has all four sides are equal. In a rectangle, that doesn't have to always be true. In a rectangle, at least the pairs need to be equal. So, for example, in this rectangle here, the only thing that matters the most is that this side is equal to the same length as that side, and the opposite side, pardon me, let me undo that. And the other side is equal to its opposite side. So the same is true for a square. The top side is equal to the bottom side, and that side is equal to the left side. So the pairs are equal, that's why it's also called a rectangle. A rhombus is a type of parallelogram that has two pairs of parallel sides and all the sides are equal. So it's like a square that has been shifted. So all of the sides are equal and the lines are still parallel, but the difference is that it does not form right angles. Instead, it forms acute angles and obtuse angles. So you're going to need to have these notes handy for today's lesson because we're going to be classifying all of these different types of quadrilaterals today. Now, if the shape doesn't have any sides that are parallel, that's just considered a general quadrilateral. So keep that in mind as we go through. So for each figure, we're going to look at the sides first and how they're interacting, whether they're parallel, and if it's two sets or just one. And then we'll look further if there's right angles in the corner, if the sides are equal, and then we'll be able to classify it from there. So taking a look at number 1, we see 3 figures, A, B, and C. Let's sketch those out. So we have figure A that have all sides are equal and there's 4 right angles. We have figure B. Again, 4 right angles inside, but this time not all of the sides are equal to each other. And then we have figure C that has 2 right angles on the inside, still 4 sides, but not all of them are parallel and not all of them are equal to each other. So we need to determine for number 1 which of these are rectangles, which is a trapezoid, and which are parallelograms. I'm sorry if I get tongue twisted. Some of these words are hard to say fast. So let's start off with which are rectangles. So remember, looking back at our notes, a rectangle has 2 pairs of parallel sides. The opposite sides need to be equal, and there's 4 right angles. So right off the bat, we know that C is not a rectangle because it only has 2 right angles on the inside, not 4. So we know C is not. So let's take a look at A. I see that A has all sides are equal, so that does mean there's 2 sets of equal sides at least. I see that the sides are parallel to the opposite side, and there's 4 right angles. That makes figure A a rectangle. Let's look at figure B. I see 4 right angles. That's one qualification for a rectangle. I see opposite sides are equal, and I see that there are 2 sets of parallel sides. So figure B is also a rectangle. Let's look at trapezoids. So looking back at our definitions, a trapezoid has exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. So we already know figures A and B, because they are rectangles, they can't be trapezoids. Trapezoids have only 1 set of parallel sides. I can see on figure C that the top and the bottom are parallel, but the 2 sides are not because this is coming down at an angle. So that is not a parallel side to the opposite side on the left. So that means that this figure C is a trapezoid because it only has 1 set of parallel sides. And last but not least, parallelograms. So looking at these, parallelograms need to have 2 pairs of parallel sides, and the opposite sides need to be equal. So looking here, we already know that figure C is a trapezoid. It only has 1 pair of parallel sides. We already determined that A and B have 2 sets of parallel sides. So both A and B, again, are going to be parallelograms. So this is why it's so important for you to have your notes handy. So in case you try to speed up the process and you didn't write down good notes, please go back and copy that down. It's very, very important for you for this lesson. All right, let's take a look at number 2 through 5. Directions say classify each figure in as many of the following ways as possible. So let's break it down with the most general and then getting to the most specific. So the way this is written out actually goes from general to specific. So quadrilateral would be the largest group. It just means it has to have 4 sides. Parallelogram means it has to have 2 sets of parallel sides. Rhombus means that it needs to have 2 sets of parallel sides and all sides equal, like a square that's squished, or a square can also be a rhombus. Rectangles, we've talked about squares, and then trapezoids as well. So let's get started. So number 2, I see the figure looks like it has all sides that are equal, but I see that we don't have right angles in the corners. So that tells me that this cannot be a rectangle or a square because it does not have right angles. So we know that this is a parallelogram because it has opposite sides are equal and the sides are parallel to one another. So this is going to be a parallelogram and a quadrilateral. Sorry, that should go first, quadrilateral. We're going to get really good at spelling these words today. So next, let's take a look. Is it a rhombus? Well, a rhombus has 4 equal sides and 2 sets of parallel sides. That's true for this as well. So yes, this is a rhombus. And the important part of that too is that it has equal, all sides are equal. It's not a rectangle because it doesn't have right angles. It's not a square because it does not have right angles. Let's see if it's a trapezoid. Let's go back and look at those definitions again. Remember, trapezoid says exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. This has 2 pairs, so it's not a trapezoid. It's a quadrilateral, a parallelogram, and a rhombus. 3 different ways we could name that figure. All right, number 3. Okay, so I see a 4-sided figure, but this one is definitely a little bit more complicated than the others. Sorry, it's not the best shape I've ever drawn, but it's okay. I'm doing my best. Okay, so we know it's a quadrilateral because it has 4 sides. All of these today will at least be quadrilaterals. Is it a parallelogram? Well, parallelograms have to have 2 sets of parallel sides. I only see 1 set of parallel sides. I see the top and the bottom are parallel. So we can rule out that it's a parallelogram because the other 2 sides are not parallel. So is it a rhombus? No, rhombus also has to have parallel sides, all 2 sets of parallel sides. Rectangles need to have right angles and parallel sides. Squares the same. Trapezoids can have exactly 1 set of parallel sides, which this one does. The top and the bottom are parallel, but the other 2 sides are not. So this is also a trapezoid. Number 4. Let's draw this out as well. Make sure you include those little squares in the corner. Do you remember what that symbolizes? That shows right angles. So looking at this, I see that we have 4 right angles. That's a really good key to keep in mind. So we know that these are all quadrilaterals. We know they're all quadrilaterals. It has 4 sides. Let's take a look at the next word, parallelogram. It has 2 sets of parallel sides, so yes, it is a parallelogram. Is it a rhombus? Are all the sides equal? Yes, they are all equal. 2 sets of parallel sides and all sides are equal. So yes, it is also a rhombus. Is it a rectangle? Yes, 2 sets of parallel sides. Opposite sides are equal to each other. 4 right angles. So yes, it is also a rectangle. Is it a square? Yep. 2 pairs of parallel sides, 4 right angles. All sides are the same, so it's also a square. It is not a trapezoid though, because trapezoids can only have 1 pair of parallel sides. Number 5. All right, let's see. This might be a little bit more complicated to draw. I'm going to do my best. Okay. Ooh, I already did that wrong. Thank you for being patient with me, friends. Okay, so this one, it looks like kind of a diamond type shape. Did the best I could. I can tell, even though my drawing is not as great, I can tell that all of these sides are equal. So I'm going to just draw that one line through each of them to show that they're all equal. So we know it's a parallelogram because it has 2 sets of parallel sides. We know it is a quadrilateral because it has 4 sides. Let's take a look. Is it a rhombus? Rhombus need to have 2 pairs of parallel sides, which it does. And it also needs to have all sides equal, which it does. It's not a rectangle or a square because the corners don't have right angles in them. And it's not a trapezoid because it has to have 2 sets of parallel, or trapezoids need 1 set of parallel sides, and this has 2. All right, so very heavy lesson on vocabulary today. We're going to do a couple more problems together, and then I'll excuse you on to do your own assignment today. And you'll want to make sure you have that vocabulary out in front of you while you do that. So directions for 6 through 8 says draw an example of each quadrilateral. Number 6 says it has 2 pairs of equal and parallel sides. So 2 pairs of equal and parallel sides. So what I'm thinking is that's one set of parallel sides that are equal. And here's another set of parallel sides that are also equal. Now, it did not say that all 4 sides needed to be equal. It just said that it had 2 pairs that were equal and parallel. So it could be, you could draw a rectangle or you could draw a square. You could also draw a rhombus. It did not say that we needed right angles, so that is not important for this one. Number 7, a quadrilateral that has 4 right angles. Well, I know that rectangles have 4 right angles. It doesn't tell me anything I need to know about the sides, but I do want to make sure that I draw in those right angle keys there, the little squares, to show that that is a right angle. All right, number 8 says it has no parallel sides. Okay, well, this is fun. It needs to be a quadrilateral, so it needs to have 4 sides. But the sides cannot be parallel. Oh, that's almost parallel. I'm going to try doing that again. It's hard to draw a quadrilateral without parallel sides. Let's see. Oh, I curved that a little bit. All right. I'm going to get it. I promise. It's going to be great. All right. Something like that. All right, numbers 10 through 13, directions say, classify each figure in as many of the following ways as possible. So since we have already been working on that together, we're going to skip this part. You're welcome to practice this if you want, but we did that pretty extensively previously. So we're going to skip through this. If you'd like to solve them, feel free to pause the video. Same thing with 14 through 16. We just solved those together, so we're going to move on and get you guys going on the next part. So you will have a portion of your assignment today that looks like this, where there'll be a picture with a shape outlined on it, and you'll need to answer some questions about that outlined shape. So we'll solve a couple of these. Number 17, directions say for 17 through 18, use the photograph. What are the different ways to classify the quadrilateral shown on the side of the building? So let's draw a little sketch of that. We have the top is at an angle, and we have the bottom coming like this. Okay, so looking at this figure, I notice that it has 4 sides, so it's a quadrilateral. So we can label it first as a quadrilateral. Then let's see what else. I see, although my drawing is not great, I see in the picture it looks like the bottom and the top, if I just continued it, those are parallel to one another, the top and the bottom. So because it has one set of parallel sides, that is a trapezoid. It's not a parallelogram because it does not have 2 pairs of parallel sides, and it doesn't have right angles, so that automatically makes it not a rectangle or a square. So it's a quadrilateral or a trapezoid. All right, number 18 says to write a problem using the photograph and solve it. So you could do lots of different things for this, but one problem I have as an idea is to explain why the shape is not a parallelogram. So I wrote the question. Now I'll solve it for you. The shape is not a parallelogram because it does not have 2 pairs of parallel sides. So I'll write in my notes here, I'll have to write my answer up here. Parallelograms have 2 pairs of parallel sides. So you could copy my problem or make up your own and write the answer to it. All right, my friends. So we are going to move on to your practice work. So for today's practice work, you're going to solve 20.6 PW. You're going to solve the whole page. I'd like you to have your vocabulary out with you, checking that you are naming all of the possibilities for each figure. When you're done with your work, use this answer key to check it. And so see how you're doing. And if you're missing a lot, maybe go back and rewatch this video or study the vocabulary more, because in a couple days you'll have a test digitally on this material. So make sure you also come ready for questions for Zoom. We'll Zoom Wednesday this week at 11.